Story 1. The Tragic Tale of Sherry Smith. In late May 1981, Sherry Smith had just graduated from Lexington High School in South Carolina, USA. Excited about finishing high school and stepping into a new phase of life, Sherry planned a celebratory party with her friends. After the party, Sherry was supposed to return home at around 4 p.m. Her father, Bob Smith, noticed her car parked at the end of the street near their house. Assuming Sherry was coming inside shortly, he continued with his activities. 10 minutes passed and Sherry had yet to enter the house. Concerned, Bob went outside to check on her. To his shock, the car's engine was still running. The driver's door was open, Sherry's purse was inside, but she was nowhere to be found. Even more alarming, he saw footprints leading from the car to the mailbox nearby, where letters were scattered. The footprints showed no return path, raising fears that Sherry had been abducted. Bob immediately alerted the police, explaining that Sherry wouldn't leave her car running with her belongings inside. Adding to their worry, Sherry had diabetes and required her medication, which was still in the car. When investigators arrived, they theorized that Sherry had exited the car to check the mailbox and was kidnapped. Despite an intensive search, no clues emerged. 2 days later, an eerie phone call broke the silence. A distorted voice claimed Sherry was safe, watching TV and in good health. The caller mentioned a crucial letter that would soon arrive in the mail. Police traced the call to a payphone 20 miles, 32 kilometers away, but found no one when they arrived. The next morning, investigators rushed to the main post office and retrieved a letter addressed to Sherry's family. The handwritten letter bore the title, "The Last Will and Testament." Written as if by Sherry herself, the note expressed love for her family and urged them to stay strong. It also contained a chilling request. She asked to be buried in a closed casket, suggesting she knew her death was imminent. Handwriting analysis confirmed the letter was written by Sherry. Her family was devastated, yet the police remained determined. The same day, the kidnapper called again. This time, he asked Sherry's mother if she now believed him. When she expressed doubt, he ominously stated she would soon hear from Sherry. He also demanded that police halt their search efforts. In subsequent calls, the abductor's comments grew more disturbing. He claimed, "Sherry is now a part of me, mentally and physically." Police suspected the caller was mentally unstable, possibly suffering from delusions or megalomania. A few days later, the kidnapper finally gave specific information, providing an address where Sherry's body could be found. The location turned out to be a building with a white frame, just as described. Tragically, Sherry's lifeless body was discovered there. The autopsy revealed she had been dead for 4 days, meaning she was killed mere hours after her abduction. The timeline matched the drafting of the letter sent to her family. With local authorities overwhelmed, the FBI was called in. They developed a criminal profile suggesting the perpetrator was a white male, 20 to 30 years old, overweight, unattractive, and intelligent. They also speculated he had technical expertise, given his ability to alter his voice. Unfortunately, their prediction that the killer might strike again proved accurate. Not long after Sherry's case, a 10-year-old girl was abducted and killed under eerily similar circumstances. Her family also received a call revealing where her body could be found. Desperate for leads, investigators re-examined Sherry's handwritten letter using an electrostatic detection apparatus. This device revealed faint impressions of a phone number on the notepad used to write the letter. Although one digit was missing, police tested various combinations until they reached a valid number. The number led to a family named Shepard, who had recently been on vacation. They revealed that a man named Larry Gene Bell had been house-sitting for them during their trip. When police played the recorded calls for the Shepards, they immediately identified the voice as Larry's. Further investigation revealed Larry matched the criminal profile almost perfectly. Although he denied involvement, hair samples found at the Shepards' house matched Sherry's. In June 1985, Larry was arrested and charged with the murders of Sherry Smith and the 10-year-old girl. During questioning, Larry made bizarre statements like, "The Mona Lisa is a man," and "Silence is golden." Despite his erratic behavior, Larry was convicted and sentenced to death. He spent 10 years on death row before being executed in 1996. Choosing the electric chair over lethal injection, Larry met his end on October 4th, leaving behind a trail of unanswered questions and grief for the families he shattered. The case we're discussing today is considered one of the most terrifying in Germany's history. The crime occurred on March 31st, 1922, but investigations lasted until 2007, 85 years in total. Why did it take so long? And what exactly happened? On March 31st, 1922, in the Bavarian town of Hinterkaifeck, 5 members of the Gruber family and their maid were murdered on their farm. Their bodies were discovered in the barn. To understand how this happened, we need to go back 6 months. During this time, the family's maid claimed she often heard strange sounds, like knocking on doors or whispering. She reported this to the family, but they dismissed her claims, saying she was imagining things. The maid, however, was certain of what she heard, and out of fear, eventually left her job. Everything seemed normal with the family until the day before the murders. On that day, the Gruber family hired a new maid. Unfortunately, this would be her first and last day on the job. Why? Because the family started noticing the strange occurrences the previous maid had reported. The father, Andreas, found a newspaper in the house that no one had bought or subscribed to. They also noticed a set of keys to the farm doors was missing. Additionally, their tool shed, where they kept items like axes and digging equipment, appeared tampered with. The most alarming sign was a set of footprints in the snow leading from the nearby forest to their home. The odd part? There were no footprints leading back to the forest, only incoming tracks. Andreas discussed these incidents with his neighbor Lorenz, who offered him weapons for protection. Andreas declined, not wanting to escalate the situation. That night, tragically, the killer, who was already hiding in the house, lured the family members one by one into the barn and killed them with an axe. The youngest child, just 2 years old, and the new maid were killed in their rooms. Shockingly, the murders went undiscovered until April 4th, 4 or 5 days later. Local residents said nothing seemed out of the ordinary on the farm. Smoke was seen coming from the chimneys, the animals were fed, and everything appeared normal. Even the mailman delivered letters without noticing anything unusual. 4 days later, a man arrived at the farm to repair a generator, as he had previously arranged with the family. He knocked on the door, but got no response. Seeing no one, he decided to fix the machine outside. After completing the repair, he noticed the family dog tied up outside, even though it hadn't been there earlier. When no one responded to his knocking, he informed neighbor Lorenz, who decided to check on the Grubers. Lorenz knocked on the door but got no answer. Entering the barn, he discovered the bodies of 4 family members. He then entered the house and found the new maid and child also dead. Strangely, it appeared that someone had been living in the house after the murders. Fires were lit and food was eaten, but no one was there. The police determined the murders had occurred on March 31st. They launched an investigation and initially suspected Lorenz, as he was the one who discovered the crime and lived nearby. However, he had an alibi and witnesses confirming he was home during the time of the murders. Despite years of investigation, no suspect was ever identified. The case remains one of the most chilling, unsolved mysteries in German history. Story 2. Story 3. The case we're discussing today has been classified by the FBI as one of the most challenging ever. So much so that the FBI turned to the public for help in solving it. You might think this case is recent and packed with events. Well, it does have many twists, so let's dive in. Our story revolves around Ricky McCormick, whose body was discovered under very mysterious circumstances in 1999. Police found his corpse in a cornfield 20 miles, about 32 kilometers from his home. This alone puzzled the police. How did his body end up there? Ricky was struggling financially, didn't own a car, and there was no public transportation to the area where he was found. It was clear Ricky hadn't gotten there on his own, so how did he end up in that field? Unfortunately, by the time police found the body, it was badly decomposed, making it impossible to determine the cause of death. As I said, this case is highly complex. The body showed no obvious injuries or signs of how Ricky might have died, but police were certain it was murder. Why? Because the location where his body was found had a history of violent crimes, making them confident this was yet another murder in the area. What made the case even more baffling was that, during their search of the scene, the only thing police found in Ricky's pocket was 2 sheets of paper. On them were a series of letters and symbols that looked like random scribbles but were believed by police to be encoded messages. Unable to decipher them, they sought help from the FBI's cryptanalysis experts, hoping the code might lead to a clue that could solve the case. The investigation dragged on for years without progress. Despite their best efforts, the FBI couldn't crack the code. In 2009, a decade after Ricky's death, the police turned to the American Cryptogram Association, an organization specializing in code breaking since the 1930s. However, even they failed to decode the symbols. In 2011, 12 years after Ricky's death, the FBI took an unprecedented step. They published the coded notes on their website and asked the public for help, stating, "We are very skilled at what we do, but we need your assistance with this case because cracking this code could be the key to solving a murder." The last time anyone saw Ricky alive was 2 days before his death at a hospital emergency room where he sought treatment for heart and lung problems. This detail might suggest that Ricky died of natural causes, such as a heart attack. However, police and the FBI continued investigating the case for over 15 years, which makes it hard to believe the cause of death was natural. This led many to wonder, is there something the police aren't telling us? Their handling of the case suggested they had information they weren't sharing with the public, possibly to avoid tipping off the perpetrator. The only hope of solving this case lies in those coded notes. But what if the writing isn't a code at all? What if it's just meaningless scribbles? Why are the police so sure it's a cipher? The FBI responded to this question in 2011, citing Ricky's mother, who claimed that her son had been writing in a secret language since childhood, a language even she didn't understand. But a year later, a newspaper cast doubt on this claim, reporting that Ricky's mother had said her son could barely write his own name and had mental health challenges, likely making the notes meaningless scribbles. What's even more suspicious is that the same newspaper revealed the police hadn't told Ricky's family about the coded notes. His family only learned of them in 2011 when the FBI published them online to seek help. So, who do we believe? The FBI or Ricky's family? One detail might tip the scales in favor of the family's account. After the newspaper reports emerged, the FBI quietly removed the part of their statement where they claimed Ricky's mother said he wrote in a secret language. Why did they delete it? We don't know. What we do know is that the case remains unsolved. And to this day, the FBI insists the notes contain a code and that Ricky wrote it himself. Story 4. The Midnight Train. It was a cold, moonless night when Sarah boarded the last train home. She had missed her earlier ride and found herself stranded in a near-deserted station. The air was eerily still, and the only sound came from the faint hum of fluorescent lights flickering overhead. When the train pulled into the platform, its rusty exterior and dimly lit windows gave it an unsettling appearance. But she had no choice. Inside, the train was nearly empty. She chose a seat by the window, the dim glow from the station receding as the train began its journey. The sound of the wheels clattering on the tracks echoed through the empty carriage. Sarah noticed something odd. The seats were old, torn in places, and the lights flickered sporadically, casting strange shadows. As the train passed through tunnels, the world outside the window disappeared, leaving only her reflection staring back. But something about the reflection felt off. She could swear she saw movement, someone or something sitting in the seats behind her. She turned around quickly. Nothing. The carriage was empty except for her. Dismissing it as her imagination, Sarah decided to distract herself. She pulled out her phone, but there was no signal. When she glanced at the time, her phone's clock was stuck at 12:03 a.m., the exact moment she had boarded the train. Moments later, the lights in the carriage went out completely, plunging her into darkness. The train slowed to a halt. Looking out the window, she saw nothing but blackness. No stations, no lights, no signs of life. Panic began to set in. Suddenly, a faint whisper broke the silence. It came from behind her. "Why are you here?" Sarah froze, her heart pounding. She turned her head slowly, and in the dim light from a passing tunnel, she saw him. A man dressed in old-fashioned clothes sitting a few rows behind her. His pale face was expressionless, and his eyes seemed hollow. I'm going home," she stammered, her voice trembling. "This train," he said, his voice barely audible, "does not go home." Before she could respond, the lights flickered back on, and the man vanished. The train jerked forward, moving faster than before, the force pinning her to her seat. Outside, the scenery changed. Instead of tunnels or towns, she saw fields of fog. where shadowy figures stood motionless, their faces hidden. Terrified, Sarah tried to pull the emergency stop, but the lever was frozen in place. The train's windows began to frost over, and she felt an icy chill creeping up her spine. The whispers grew louder, filling the carriage with unintelligible words. Just as she thought she couldn't take it anymore, the train screeched to a stop. The doors opened, revealing a platform shrouded in mist. A single sign hung above. Final stop. Sarah hesitated but felt an unseen force urging her to step out. As she did, the train doors slammed shut behind her, and it disappeared into the fog. She stood alone on the platform, her breath visible in the cold air. From the mist emerged figures, silent, shadowy passengers, slowly approaching her. Their hollow eyes seemed to pierce through her soul. Then she realized the horrifying truth. She had boarded a train meant for the dead. No one ever saw Sarah again, but on cold, moonless nights, some passengers claimed to see her reflection in the windows of passing trains, forever searching for a way back home. Story 5. The Girl at Platform 7. The small, quiet train station at Willow Creek had always been a place of eerie charm. By day, it bustled with commuters, but by night, it became desolate, shrouded in a chilling silence. Locals whispered about Platform 7, claiming it was haunted, but few dared to discuss why. It all started years ago with the mysterious death of a girl named Emily Ward. She was only 19 when her life ended on that platform. Witnesses recalled hearing her scream piercing the still night, followed by the sickening sound of a body hitting the tracks. When the station master arrived, all he found was a pool of blood and Emily's red scarf tangled in the iron rails. Her death was ruled a tragic accident, but rumors suggested something far darker. The night of the encounter. Late one evening, Claire, a young university student, missed her train and had no choice but to wait for the next one on Platform 7. She had heard the stories but dismissed them as small-town superstition. The platform was dimly lit, with a single flickering light overhead. The cold wind seemed to whistle through the empty station, carrying with it a faint, unplaceable scent, like old flowers and damp earth. Claire sat on a bench, scrolling through her phone to pass the time. Out of the corner of her eye, she noticed a girl standing at the far end of the platform. She was pale, dressed in a long, white dress that seemed oddly outdated, and her hair hung limply over her shoulders. The girl was barefoot, her feet smeared with dirt, and she clutched a red scarf in her hands. Claire's first instinct was to ask if she was okay, but something about the girl's motionless stance and downward gaze stopped her. "Do you need help?" Claire called out hesitantly. The girl didn't respond. Instead, she slowly raised her head, revealing empty, hollow eyes. A cold shiver ran down Claire's spine as the girl took a step closer. Suddenly, the faint sound of a train horn echoed in the distance. The girl tilted her head as if listening, then smiled, a haunting, twisted smile that sent Claire stumbling back. "Don't stay here," the girl whispered, her voice echoing unnaturally. Before Claire could process what was happening, the girl turned and walked toward the edge of the platform. The sound of the approaching train grew louder, its headlights piercing through the darkness. "No, stop!" Claire shouted, running after her. But just as Claire reached out to grab the girl, she vanished into thin air. The train sped past, its force knocking Claire back onto the cold, hard ground. A chilling revelation. Shaken, Claire scrambled to her feet. She looked around, but the girl was gone. All that remained was the red scarf, fluttering gently in the wind. Claire picked it up, her hands trembling. The scarf felt damp and cold, as if it had just been pulled from the ground. She clutched it tightly as she walked to the station master's office, desperate to tell someone what she had seen. The elderly station master listened with a grim expression. When she showed him the scarf, his face turned ashen. "That scarf belonged to Emily Ward," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "She died here, right on Platform 7. No one knows how or why, but you're not the first to see her." Claire felt a chill run down her spine. "What does she want?" The station master shook his head. "Some say she's warning people. Others believe she's searching for someone to join her. Whatever it is, be grateful you got away." Claire left the station that night, vowing never to return. But the memory of Emily's hollow eyes and chilling smile haunted her dreams. To this day, travelers at Willow Creek claim to see a girl in white lingering on Platform 7. If you're unlucky enough to meet her, take her warning seriously, because not everyone who sees her makes it off the platform alive. Story 6. If you find a crying child on the trail, don't follow them. My girlfriend and I are seasoned hikers. We've tackled everything from rugged mountain trails to swampy, mosquito-infested paths, and we've always made it out unscathed. But this time was different. This time, the trail almost didn't let us go. It started with a warning. I know that sounds over the top, but it's true. The guy at the ranger station, a wiry, middle-aged man with a leathery face, looked up from his clipboard as we signed in. "You two sticking to the main trail?" He sounded like he must have smoked 4 packs a day for the last decade. "Planning on taking the loop trail up to the summit," I replied. "We've been looking into it for a while and we think the weather's right for it this weekend. We've never been through Baroque Park before, but we've heard it's beautiful." My girlfriend curled her arm through mine and rested her cheek on my shoulder. "It's going to be great. I think he might have something special planned for us." I didn't. My smile turned nervous. The ranger hesitated, his pen hovering over the paper. Could he tell I didn't have a ring? Was he about to out me? "Number." He braced a hand on the counter and leaned forward, eyes serious beneath bushy eyebrows. "Stick to the marked paths, and if you hear anything strange, like a kid crying, you keep walking. Don't stop. Don't look. Just keep going." "What?" My girlfriend gave a nervous laugh. "Don't want you to get lost." The ranger's eyes didn't waver. "People go looking for what they shouldn't, and not all of them come back." We decided it was just some backwoods superstition to spook tourists. What else could it be? So after we brushed off the nerves, we shouldered our packs and started up the trail. The first few hours were uneventful, just the two of us surrounded by towering pines, the crunch of dirt and leaves underfoot, and the occasional bird call. If you've ever been on a hike before, well, there you go. Standard day. My girlfriend kept looking over at me, eyes gone to honey. I didn't know why she thought this was a special proposal trip. It wasn't until we parked I even realized that's where her expectations were set. And my attention? Yeah, I was trying to figure out what I was going to do to cushion the blow when we hit summit. Then we heard it, a child's voice crying. We stopped dead in our tracks. Amber froze, her eyes wide. "Do you hear that?" I nodded, my stomach twisting into knots. It sounded like a little girl, maybe 6 or 7 years old. "Help me," she was calling out, her voice breaking with sobs. "Please help me. Mommy? Daddy?" Her voice grew quiet with fear. "Anyone? Hello? Are you okay?" I called, my voice bouncing off the trees. The crying stopped. For a moment, the forest was silent. Too silent. No wind, no birds, nothing. Then the crying started again. Louder this time. Closer. "We need to check it out," Amber said, already stepping off the trail. She waved her arms to the side to keep her balance as she made her way down the incline. Every instinct I had screamed at me to stop her. "The ranger said..." "Screw what the ranger said," she snapped. "If it was your kid out there, wouldn't you want someone to help?" She had a point. Against my better judgment, I followed her down the incline and into the trees. The crying led us deeper into the woods. "Help me! Someone! Please!" She sounded frantic. But the further we went, the more I noticed something was off. The voice wasn't changing direction. Normally, if someone's lost, their voice shifts as they move or turn their head. But this sound, it was static, like it was coming from a fixed point. The ranger's warning came back to mind. My steps started to slow down. "Amber, I think we should go back. Something's not right. I can't find you. Please, I'm scared." The kid was sobbing now. "Stop acting like a jerk," Amber snapped. "She's got to be right ahead of us." Amber was right. 20 more feet and we saw her. She was sitting on a fallen log, her back to us, wearing a dirty pink jacket and clutching her knees to her chest. "Hey, sweetie," Amber called gently, stepping closer. "Are you lost? Where are your parents?" The girl didn't answer. She just kept crying, her shoulders shaking with each sob. "Please help me." Amber crouched down, reaching out to touch her shoulder. "Wait," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. Something about this felt wrong. Why was she just sitting there? When Amber had called for her, why hadn't she tried to find us? Amber, we should just go get the ranger. Come on. The girl's crying stopped. In one smooth, jerky motion, she turned to face us. Her eyes weren't right. They were too large, too dark, reflecting the light like an animal's. You found me! Her mouth stretched wide into a grin that split her face unnaturally, revealing rows of sharp, needle-like teeth. I knew you would. I knew if I called for you, you would find me. Decroy. Then her entire skin began to split down the middle like a zipper. I don't know what I was expecting to see underneath, but it wasn't this. It wasn't the sinewy, raw-looking creature that crawled out of its human shell like a spider shedding its exoskeleton. Amber screamed, stumbling backward. I grabbed her arm, yanking her to her feet, shouting, "Run!" So loudly it made my throat sting. We bolted, crashing through the underbrush, branches whipping at our faces. Behind us, I heard the creature give a low, guttural growl, followed by the unmistakable sound of something running. Fast. It was chasing us. We hit the incline, then the trail, and didn't stop running until we burst back into the ranger station, gasping for air. The ranger looked up from his desk, his face grim. You heard it, didn't you? We nodded, too shaken to speak. He sighed, getting up and locking the door. You're lucky you ran. Most people don't. We didn't ask what he meant. We didn't want to know. We've hiked dozens of trails since that day, but we've never gone back to that forest. And if we ever hear crying in the woods again, we'll keep walking. Story 7. The silent room in my house keeps making me visit. I've always been a man of routine. Every morning, I brew a pot of coffee, walk the creaky floors of my old farmhouse, and sit by the window overlooking the woods. The house has been too quiet since Alice passed. She was the love of my life, and now it's just me here, rattling around in these empty rooms. Lately, though, things haven't felt right. This morning, as I sat by the window with my coffee, something about the woods unsettled me. The trees looked different, too close, their gnarled branches reaching out like skeletal hands. And I saw movement out there, shadows slipping between the trunks. I told myself it was just wildlife, maybe deer or foxes, but the shapes were too tall, too human. I shook it off. I've been lonely after all. Maybe my mind is playing tricks on me. The noises started about a week ago. At night, when the house should have been still, I heard footsteps upstairs. They were soft but deliberate, pacing back and forth. I didn't panic. The house is old and old houses make noise. But when I finally went upstairs to check, I found something I couldn't explain. The door to the guest room was open. I always keep it locked. I stepped inside and froze. The room looked just as I remembered it. The bed neatly made, the rocking chair in the corner, Alice's old books stacked on the nightstand. But something about the air felt wrong, heavy, like the room itself was holding its breath. I backed out, shut the door, and locked it again. The sounds didn't stop. They only got worse. Footsteps turned into heavy thuds. The whispers started next, low and guttural, coming from the walls. And then the objects began appearing. I found Alice's favorite scarf draped over the chair in the living room. A photograph of our wedding, its glass cracked, lying on the kitchen counter. I don't remember moving these things, but who else could have? I called my son, David, to tell him what was happening. He listened, but I could hear the patience in his voice, the way he was humoring me. You're just lonely, Dad, he said. Maybe it's time to move closer to us. This is my home. I'm not leaving. Last night, I woke up to the sound of the guest room door slamming shut. My heart thundered in my chest as I grabbed the flashlight from my bedside table and crept upstairs. The door was wide open. Inside, the rocking chair was moving on its own, its wood creaking under an invisible weight. Alice's books were scattered across the floor, their pages torn and fluttering as if caught in a breeze. And then I saw her. Alice, I whispered, my voice shaking. She turned slowly, and I wished she hadn't. Her face was pale, her eyes black voids that seemed to pull me in. Her mouth moved, but the words were drowned out by a deafening roar that filled the room. I stumbled back, dropping my flashlight. When I looked again, the room was empty. I tried to stay away from the guest room after that, but it felt like the house wouldn't let me. The noises, the whispers, the slamming doors. They all drew me back. Tonight, I couldn't resist. I stood in the doorway, staring into the room. It was bare now. No bed, no rocking chair. The walls were scrawled with messages in a trembling hand. Where am I? Help me. Why did you forget? The words filled every inch of the walls, overlapping and chaotic. Alice. She stood in the corner, her back to me, utterly still. Her silver hair hung in stringy clumps. In the center of the room was a mirror. I stepped closer and looked into it. I didn't see myself. I saw Alice. She was screaming, her hands pressed against the glass. Her mouth formed the same word over and over. Remember. The memories hit me all at once. Alice, frail and sick, lying in a hospital bed, her voice begging me to stay with her. The beeping machines, the moment she slipped away. I remembered her funeral, the empty house, sitting in the guest room night after night, unable to let her go. And then I remembered forgetting. I forgot Alice. I forgot the love of my life. This morning, David came by. I don't remember calling him, but he's here now, walking through the house, calling my name. He found me in the guest room, sitting in the corner. The walls are blank now, the mirror cracked and dusty. Dad, he said softly, kneeling beside me. What happened? She's still here, I whispered. Tears streamed down my face. I see her. She's angry because I forgot her. David's face twisted with grief. Dad, he said gently, Mom's been gone for years. You're just confused. But he doesn't understand. She's not gone. She's in the walls, the floors, the very bones of this house. David took my hand and helped me to my feet. Come on, Dad. Let's get you some help. As we left the house, I glanced back at the guest room. The door was open, and inside, the rocking chair moved ever so slightly, creaking in the silence. Story 8. Maids and robbers were eaten alive by dogs. Back in 1992, my dad and his colleague witnessed something truly stomach-churning during their duty as guards in a well-known subdivision in Singapore. The subdivision they worked in had many large houses, but very few people lived there. Throughout the day, fewer than 15 cars would enter or leave. It was so quiet, my dad called it a ghost town. When construction started at the back of the subdivision, the noise from their equipment was loud, but we never received complaints, likely because the residents rarely stayed home. 2 months after the construction began, a typhoon came, and unfortunately, only my dad and one of his co-workers showed up for duty. The rain was heavy, and they were sheltering in the small guardhouse near the subdivision gate around 10 p.m. They needed to report the subdivision's perimeter status to their superior officer, SO, so they went on rounds braving the strong winds. The sound of the wind blowing through the trees was deafening. Visibility was zero.